Last week, we saw Jamar Chase, Justin Fields, DJ Moore, Travis Etienne, Breece Hall, and George Kittle go off in fantasy football and help people win their fantasy matchups. This week, here in week 6, I am bringing you 10 players who will absolutely dominate in fantasy football and help you win your matchups. I'm sorry if you're facing these guys, and if you have them in your lineup, get ready for a fantastic week. The first player that will dominate here in week 6, I'm so excited, that is Jordan Addison at the Chicago Bears. Now, I know he's dealing with an ankle injury at the time of recording. I expect him to play. In 2023, the Chicago Bears give up the 11th most points to fantasy wide receivers, and Justin Jefferson has officially been placed on IR, so he will not be available. In week 5, when Justin Jefferson went down with that injury, Jordan Addison took over in 12 personnel. He and KJ Osborne were the guys that led the way. As a result, we finally saw Jordan Addison ending up with a career high in fantasy points, snap share, and targets. He finished that day with 6 receptions on a career high 9 targets for 64 yards and a touchdown. Addison is going to absolutely ball out in Justin Jefferson's absence. The Vikings, get this, currently lead the NFL in passing attempts per game. They are one of 3 teams in the NFL that throw the ball more than 40 times per game. And now, no Justin Jefferson, there will be 11.8 targets per game vacated within this offense. That is the number of targets Justin Jefferson got in weeks 1 to 4 before the injury. Keep in mind, in 2023, the Bears have allowed a lot of big games for fantasy wide receivers. 18.6 points to Romeo Doubs, 29 to Mike Evans, 18.5 to Curtis Samuel. On the year, they're allowing, get this, over 30 PPR points to the wide receiver position. It is wheels up for a talented guy, Jordan Addison, first round pick. He's going to start putting his name on the map here in week 6. All right, the second player that we are starting with confidence, he's going to dominate. That is Raheem Mostert versus the Carolina Panthers. In 2023, this is one of the best matchups for running backs. They give up the second most points to the position, the Panthers do. Unfortunately, we heard this week that Devon Achane won't play. He's going to be on the IR, and Jeff Wilson is practicing. But regardless, if Wilson plays or not, I'm expecting a huge week for Raheem Mostert. In 2023, guys, the Dolphins running back room as a whole has scored the most fantasy points of any backfield in the NFL. Mostert and Achane alone are averaging over 41 PPR points a game, just between the two of them. Mostert himself is the RB2 on the year. He's averaging 21 PPR points per game. In weeks 1 to 2, when Mostert had no Achane to compete with for targets or for touches rather, in those games, Mostert played 73% of the snaps, and he averaged over 15 touches a game and 19 PPR points per game. Now he gets to lead this backfield in a game versus the Carolina Panthers, the same Panthers who in 2023 have given up 44 points to the Atlanta backfield, 15 points to Tony Jones alone, 30 points to Ken Walker, and 21 to David Montgomery. This defense in Carolina currently allows 140 rushing yards per game to opponents. That is the 7th highest mark in the NFL. It is absolutely wheels up again for Raheem Mostert. All right, the third player that I'm excited to start this week, he's going to dominate. That is Calvin Ridley versus the Indianapolis Colts. In 2023, the Colts are a top 10 matchup for fantasy wide receivers. And actually, if you guys remember back to week 1, Calvin Ridley had his best ever game as a Jacksonville Jaguar versus this Indianapolis Colts defense. He put up 8 catches on 11 targets, over 100 yards, and a touchdown. He finished as the wide receiver 6 on that week when they faced the Colts. For the Colts secondary, after losing Stephon Gilmore, they are struggling to contain wide receivers on a weekly basis. On the year, Calvin Ridley is averaging 7.2 targets per game, and last week in London, we finally saw him and Trevor Lawrence get back on the same page. This Colts defense is allowing 382 total yards per game to opposing offenses, which is the 5th highest mark in the NFL. This could be another huge game for Calvin Ridley as he has this comeback campaign here in 2023. All right, the fourth player that is going to dominate has to be in your rosters here in week 6. Alvin Kamara at the Houston Texans. In 2023, the Texans give up the 7th most points to fantasy running backs, and Alvin Kamara has been absolutely lethal for fantasy football since returning from suspension. He's averaging a massive 25 touches per game, over 20 PPR points, and he is the RB7 per game in that time. This is going to blow your mind. Alvin Kamara currently, today, is on track to see 119 targets this year, and he has missed 3 games. Now he gets to face the Houston Texans, who are allowing 22.5 points per game to opposing running backs. Remember, they gave up 18 to ETN. They gave up 25.5 to J.K. Dobbins and Justice Hill in week 1. They gave up 20 to Zach Moss. With Derek Carr still healing from that shoulder injury, expect Kamara to be a consistent check down option for him, and he's going to have another huge game here in week 6. Man, those people who drafted Kamara or traded for him, you should feel very good right now. All right, the 5th player that I think is going to dominate in week 6, it's a tight end. So if you need a streaming option, this guy should be in your starting lineup. That is Logan Thomas at the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons give up the 2nd most points to fantasy tight ends this year. Is it crazy to say? Tell me, is it crazy to say that the Commanders' offense runs through Logan Thomas? We were all so excited for Eric Bieniemy to deploy an offense because we saw his success in Kansas City. However, he looks determined to feature Logan Thomas like he featured a pretty damn good tight end in Kansas City. I'm not saying that they're as talented as each other, but they are being given a similar role. In 2023, guys, Logan Thomas is a tight end 6 in a per game basis. Okay? In games where he is healthy, he's averaging 7.3 targets per game and 54 yards. More targets per game in those games when he's healthy than Mark Andrews, Zach Ertz, Sam Laporta, and Darren Waller. More targets per game than Terry McLaurin, his teammate, Jahan Dotson, his teammate, Curtis Samuel, his teammate. More targets per game than CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Ayuk, and DJ Moore. He's been a featured player in this offense. Now he plays the Falcons, who give up over 13 points per game to the tight end position. You got to start Logan Thomas with confidence here in week 6. All right, the 6th player that's going to dominate. It's been a rough year so far for him, but expect a massive bounce back in week 6 for CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb is at the Los Angeles Chargers in 2023. There is not a better matchup for wide receivers than the Chargers. They give up the most points to fantasy wide receivers. Keep in mind, in 3 of 5 games so far for the Cowboys, guys, CeeDee Lamb has not been necessary for this team to win. In week 1, they blew out the Giants 40-0. Remember the 30-10 beatdown of the New York Jets, and then the 38-3 beatdown of the New England Patriots. Now, we have to agree that Dak Prescott completely tanked any hopes of this offense being successful last week versus the 49ers, but the good news is we have a bounce back opportunity for CeeDee Lamb and this entire offense. In 2023, the Chargers, who CeeDee Lamb is playing, are giving up over 40 points per game to fantasy wide receivers. They are the only team giving up over 40 points per game. 44 points to Tyreek this year, 28 to Justin Jefferson, over 15 to Devontae Adams. This should be a competitive game. Both teams are able to score the ball. It should be hopefully a high-scoring game, and I think CeeDee Lamb bounces back. I think we'll see similar to what we saw in the game versus the Jets this year for CeeDee Lamb, where he had 13 targets and put up over 24 fantasy points. He's got to be in your starting lineup. He bounces back this week. All right, the 7th player that I am starting this week is Kyren Williams versus the Cardinals. In 2023, the Cardinals give up the 4th most points to fantasy running backs, and this is a fantastic matchup. We have to acknowledge that Cooper Kupp returning did negatively impact Kyren Williams. I agree. However, what's the context in that game? Last week, Cooper Kupp returns. They play the Philadelphia Eagles. There is not a worse matchup for fantasy running backs this year than the Eagles. A lot of that has to do with their defensive line. No team has been able to successfully run against that defense this year, and the Rams were playing from behind the entire game. Now, we get Kyren going up against the Cardinals, who, to their credit, have been a better team than we anticipated, but this team is going to be up, and Kyren Williams is going to get a ton of touches on the ground. On average, the Cardinals are giving up over 26 points per game to running backs, and Kyren is dominating touches in this backfield. Let's look at his usage so far in 2023 compared to other running backs. His snap percentage, he's playing over 83% of the snaps. Nobody is playing more at the running back position. His routes run per team dropback. He has the most routes run per team dropback of any running back, 71% of the time. He has the fourth most expected fantasy points. His team target share over 11%. His rushing attempt share over 61%. You got to put Kyren Williams into your lineup with confidence. And my quarterback start of the week is his teammate, Matthew Stafford versus the Cardinals. In 2023, the Cardinals give up the third most points to fantasy quarterbacks. It's actually kind of wild when you think about how we viewed this wide receiver room before the year versus what they actually are now. This could be a top 5 wide receiver room with Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell. Who would have thought? But Matthew Stafford has weapons all around him. Stafford's the quarterback 15 on the year. Before last week, he was averaging less than a touchdown per game. Now, you add Cooper Kupp to this team, and already he's got 2 touchdowns last week versus the Eagles. Now they get the Cardinals. The Cardinals have been producing week-winning quarterback performances every week for fantasy football. 18 points to Sam Howell, 35 to Daniel Jones. That's the only game Daniel Jones has over 10 points, 23 to Brock Purdy, and 30 to Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow needed to bounce back. The Cardinals were on the schedule, and he put up huge amount of points. You got to stream Matthew Stafford with confidence this week. All right, the 9th player that I think is going to absolutely dominate this week on an offense that's been a little inconsistent, Drake London versus the Commanders. In 2023, the Commanders gave up the 3rd most points to fantasy wide receivers. London, wide receiver 41 on the year. Keep in mind, he had a goose egg in week 1. From week 2 onwards, he's a wide receiver 23. Much better from week 2 onwards. The Commanders are a mess in their secondary this year. As a Commanders fan, I'm willing to say that it's true. Our secondary is still pretty bad. Our first-round pick, Emmanuel Forbes, played just 14 snaps last week before being benched. And it feels like it's now a weekly tradition for this secondary to just give up a huge game. Take a second and remember, guys. Just take 1 second, all right? How did you feel about the Chicago Bears before week 5? Before that Thursday night football game? What were we all saying about them? How did we perceive this team? 0-4, maybe the worst team in the NFL. Is Justin Fields going to keep his job? All they needed was to face the Commanders secondary, because once they did, the Commanders fixed all of that for them. They won the game. DJ Moore had his best ever professional game. 8 receptions, 230 yards, and 3 touchdowns. The week before that, the Eagles played the Commanders, and A.J. Brown almost put up 40 points. He had 2 receiving touchdowns. On the year, this secondary is allowing 38 plus points per game to wide receivers. I promise you, Desmond Ridder, Kyle Pitts, Drake London are all thrilled to see this secondary on the matchup. All right, and the last player that I'm going to talk about today that I think is going to dominate, bad game last week, but he has a bounce back here in week 6. James Cook versus the New York Giants. The Giants give up the 5th most points to fantasy running backs. James Cook, the RB16 on the year. Now, last week, we talked about this. It was a bad game, but there's reasons why. They were down the entire game. They had to abandon the run. Now, they faced the Giants. The Giants probably will not be up on the Buffalo Bills. I'm expecting a dominant performance for this offense. Keep in mind, they face the Giants, who have been destroyed this year. They lost 40-0 in week 1. They barely beat the Cardinals in week 2. In week 3, they lost 30-12. In week 4, they lost 24-3, and they just got manhandled by the Dolphins. All right, the Bills are going to be up in this game, and they will be able to establish the run with James Cook. Before week 5, James was averaging 17.5 touches per game and was pretty efficient on the ground and in the air. I expect James Cook to be back in form and maybe, just maybe, have his best ever fantasy game here in week 6. All right, those are 10 players that are going to absolutely dominate this week. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Hey, if you want to support what we do over here, it's just us. It's just myself and my co-host, Badaki. All the ideas to brainstorming to coming up with, executing these videos, design, graphic design, video editing, audio, live streams, admin, everything you guys see, there's not a team back here helping us. It's just myself and my co-host, Badaki. So if you like what we do and you want to keep us going, go ahead and use our promo code LAND, LAND. Sign up to the Flock Fantasy website. There's some amazing perks over there, great articles, rankings, redraft, dynasty, devy content. It is an incredible value for you. So go check it out. We appreciate the love, appreciate the support, and go get a win here in week 6. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.